ValueX is the company that I founded more than 4 years ago. When Bitcoin actually went through the roof, you put up a website and then you just collect money. Most of the projects out there are not precise enough or simply wrong on market opportunity. We only need 0.1% and we're already a unicorn. And the team, to be very honest, mostly is the source that breaks and kills the projects. Letting new technologies and then finding a way how to regulate it. The fragmentation of the European capital markets is one of the reasons why we face this liquidity crunch. The lack of capital efficiency in Europe is around 300 billion per year. Competitiveness of Europe in the face of free zones and innovation zones around the globe. How many of the successful startups and especially scale-ups have their headquarters in Europe? That most of them are not in Europe anymore. It's highest time for all politicians in Europe to change something here. On a regulated, trustful basis, but giving enough freedom that new opportunities can grow. Yep. We are quite strong in new ideas, in brilliant founders, but we are so weak on then funding them when they go into their scaling phase. We have this potential, we have these bright minds and innovative people that create something new, and then when they start growing, we give them away. I mean, think about this. Guys, please wake up.
Hey, my name is Darius and welcome back to Founders Unchained, where we sit down with founders, builders, innovators, and experts in the field. Today we have a special guest, Oliver Schmitt, who is the founder and CEO of ValueX. So it's really a pleasure to see you in this episode. I'm so happy that you came. And for the people who don't know you, can you just explain a bit about yourself, what is your background, and what you do? And the most importantly, how you can help startups.
Yeah, Darius, thank you for having me. First of all, it's a pleasure to be interviewed and to have this conversation today. Happy to introduce me a little bit. Oliver, German pronunciation of my family name would be Schmitt. A little bit difficult, maybe. Smith would be the English version, yes. I'm from Austria. I live in Vienna. I was born also here. I'm operating on I would say, European scope and perspective. ValueX is the company that I founded more than 4 years ago. It's operating in Liechtenstein and in Austria. And the focus actually that we pursue is to support good projects, startups and scale-ups from the emerging tech area. In terms of good projects, I have to explain maybe a little bit, because when we started our ideation of what we are doing today, that was the year 21. And if you maybe remember, that was really a wild year. Yeah, that was the year when Bitcoin actually went through the roof, and the whole crypto scene was still a little bit like Wild West. There were tons of projects out there from everywhere around the world, including Asia, that actually had the impression that, you have a wild idea, you put up a website and then you just collect money because it's just out there and everybody's waiting for these projects. And so we sat down back then and we said, okay, we have tons, really, literally hundreds of thousands of projects. And of course, most of them have had no substance. And we said, okay, what can we do in order to, actually improve the space and in order to identify projects that have substance and that are really worth supporting. And that was exactly the moment when we decided or found out that we should do something like a rating. And that's what we still do today. So we have our 17 points rating, which is something like a mini due diligence in order to, find out where are the weaknesses, where are the strong points, and is this a project that has the substance that is worth to supporting it? So that's actually the story of ValueX. Maybe a few words about myself. I have a background in economics, have been studying in Vienna, started my professional career in the telecommunications area in the beginnings of the 2000s, which was also, I would say, really exciting area back then, because we were at the turning point of communications, but also data management, because it was the time when mobile data evolved. It can be compared to what we see today with blockchain technology and AI, because back then we all knew mobile data will change everything. It will change the world. It will change how we do business, and we just didn't know exactly how this will happen. I experienced the time, shortly also before the phone without the keyboard came to the market, and which actually was one of the big drivers, of course, of this mobile data wave and a change in the market. So that's what also, I would say, formed myself and my approach towards markets and opportunities and startups, and what works and what also doesn't work. Going back to ValueX and what we have been doing for the last 4+ years is actually about identifying projects of good quality. And if it comes to quality, then it basically boils down to 2 major points, I would say. First point is about market opportunity. And I always repeat myself, but it's so important because most of the projects out there are actually not precise enough or simply wrong on market opportunity. Because market opportunity is so much more than simple math. Simple math is, our tam, sam, som game, which actually says there is a market, it's huge, we only need 0.1% and we're already a unicorn. And the bad news is that it's not as simple as that. This math everybody can do, but the question is always which target segments, which sub-segments, and how can we actually approach these target segments in a successful way. If you go down that road and into these details, then of course it becomes exhausting, that needs work, that needs time. And that's what, of course, most of the startups tend to avoid, because the simple math is the easy way. But at the end of the day, you have to do your homework, and you have to prepare a clear idea and a clear approach of these segments, sub-segments, and how you can successfully approach them. And in order to successfully approach these segments, you need to be aware and you have to have a clear idea of your competitive strength in these sub-segments. And you also have to have a clear idea about the market attractiveness or segment attractiveness. And this is actually a matrix that you have to focus on. So have a clear idea about which segments are attractive, mostly in terms of revenue or profitability. And then you have to find out in which of these segments can you, as a project with the team you have and the solution that you're offering, where you can unfold competitive strength. This is the first approach. And the second part that is actually where projects can make it or break it is the team itself. So summing up all our experience from these years, I can say that on the one side, it's the market opportunity that has not been investigated and identified in appropriate way. And the second part is then the team. And the team, to be very honest, mostly is the source that breaks and kills the projects. Because it's not because the founders are weak or are not capable of understanding how the solution should work, but I always compare it to a lack of being able to further develop oneself. So that this is what out of these years I can really confirm. Founders either are able to further develop themselves, because if you start a business and you're a founder and you're 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, this is a complete different story than you are a team of 20 or 30 people. It demands a completely different approach, and it also demands a completely different skill set. And what we observe regularly is that the founders are great founders. They are skilled, they are intelligent, and they have a vision. Yeah? And this is actually what makes a founder. But then comes building the business. And most founders do not dispose over the capabilities of scaling a business. And this is where the problem comes in. So either the founder is open towards change and is open to accept that he or she is not capable of further developing itself and steps aside, or develops itself. And this is where actually we need, and this is my job also, you need coaching, you need mentoring, and you need actually working on yourself.
So this is what I wanted to ask you. I know that you are a serial entrepreneur, you are running multiple businesses. I'm pretty sure that we will get to that point. Maybe you can explain what kind of businesses you run in the same time, how you do it, how it's possible to run multiple businesses at one time. And because I think this is like super skill. And I agree with you that you were saying that people know how to start, but we don't know how to run later on when we scale the business. And I remember one of the guests, he was explaining that is one way when you are running business, which actually had like $1 million funding. Another thing is to run the business who is having $100 million of investment into the business. I'm just using this example because you said it's one thing to work with a couple of people, and it's completely another story when you need to manage huger teams and bigger teams. Let's come back to other things related to other businesses, what you run. So as I understand, ValueX is not only one thing what you do, you also organizing Vienna Congress. You are a public speaker, you are attending many events, and I actually seen you physically and virtually being as a pitching sessions jury. You actually was attending multiple events, and I seen then startups actually was pitching to you. So you are quite experienced, and I think it's very valuable for my community to understand more what you do and how you do it, and maybe you can share some also good advices for the startups, and maybe we can learn something from that.
Yeah, I'm happy to do so. So, as mentioned, ValueX is so like the basis where we identify and support good projects. So we support them actually in literally building the venture, getting funded. When we invest into projects, we act more like a venture studio. So our ticket sizes are rather small, but we support them in getting investors in. We are also operating a network of VCs, family offices, and business angels. And we also support projects in launching on the market and becoming successful on the market. And in this respect, I'm sometimes stepping into also interim management positions, like I'm currently doing with CATS. It's CAATS.io. It's a digitalization platform for the care industry. It has been building an AI-enabled platform. This is one of the rare projects where blockchain technology is not applied, because most of our projects are in some way deploying blockchain technology. Yeah, so that's the one side of the business. So ValueX runs its platform of ValueX selection, where we showcase the good projects that reach a certain level of points within our rating, which is our quality filter. It can go from, we just showcase the projects on our platform and provide them with some visibility on our socials and towards our investors network on the casual level of cooperation. And it goes to, as just mentioned, that we really step into the projects, become like co-founders. And normally when I support projects on this interim management level, I come with a team, with some people from my team that do different tasks, like, for example, a social media manager or someone who is capable of taking responsibility for tokenomics related issues and so on. So that's what I do with ValueX, and that's why I also support additional other projects and step into other roles also. And then the second part that you mentioned is Vienna Congress, which actually came out of a discussion that we had 1.5, 2 years already ago, where we said that Vienna is catching up as a crypto hub. Maybe you are aware that today most of the biggest crypto exchanges have their European headquarters in Vienna. due to the regulator that is really professional and reliable, and also partners like EY that are also supporting the Vienna hub, the center for crypto exchanges and digital assets economy. Yeah, we said, okay, we would like to do something in Vienna. We would especially establish a conference that is influential on a European and international level, because we have some initiatives here in Vienna, but rather on a, I would say, regional reach. And we want to establish something that is really operating and has influence on our European and international level. And so we came to the idea to establish a conference about digital assets and designing the format in a different way. Because conferences normally work like that. They announce that they are super large and they have thousands of participants and partners. And this is what we don't do. So we promise that the conference will stay small, exclusive, invite only, but with really the top quality of participants and partners. So its aim is shaping the industry of digital assets. Why are we doing this and why do we have this objective? That's quite simple, because if you look on Europe and where the sources of growth and prosperity come from, then you will find out it's new technologies, it's digital assets, it's AI. And if we manage to take advantage of these new developments, then I think we can have time of growth and prosperity again, because this has been lacking for the last nearly 20 years already. So since the last financial crisis back in 2008, actually Europe decided to go out of it with the approach to regulate everything that is new. And let me be a little bit critical maybe here, to over-bureaucratize everything. And whereas, for example, the US had a different approach with, letting new technologies and then finding a way how to regulate it. With the result that in 2008, GDP of the European Union and the US economy was roughly on the same level. So I think US was just a few 3, 4% or 5% ahead. And today US economy is at 150% compared to the European Union. And this alone shows that we have been quite successful in killing our growth, in killing prosperity in Europe. And the broader vision about our conference is to bring growth and prosperity back to Europe. Yes. And digital assets is one source that can be used for that. And this is why we are organizing the conference in 4 executive tracks. The first one being about capital efficiency, and the problem or the issue that we face behind it is the liquidity crunch that we face in Europe. For example, the fragmentation of the European capital markets is one of the reasons why we face this liquidity crunch. And capital efficiency is something that can have tremendous effects. So for example, the studies show that the lack of capital efficiency in Europe is around 300 billion per year. So you see that if we manage to improve this, effects could be tremendous and could really help in Europe. That's the first track. The second track is, of course, about regulatory. We all know that regulation is, in general, a good thing because it creates a framework, it creates trust, and it can really bring good effects. But we have been, as mentioned before, quite successful in Europe to overregulate. The third track is about AI and digital assets and banking and disintermediation, how the future of banking and digital assets together with AI looks like and which framework we need there. And finally, the last one is basically about competitiveness of Europe in the face of free zones and innovation zones around the globe. Yeah. If you look on the productiveness alone of these free zones in the US, in Middle East, in Asia, you see that this is really tremendous. Yeah. How many licenses they produce, how many new startups and scale-ups they produce on a yearly basis compared to Europe. And if you then compare it to simply with how many of the successful startups and especially scale-ups have their headquarters in Europe. And then if you find out that most of them are not in Europe anymore, then for me, it's highest time for all politicians in Europe to change something here. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I strongly believe that we need a digital asset free zone in Europe in order to foster the whole ecosystem and in order to build successful, super successful businesses in that area here, and in turn to get positive macroeconomic effects from that.
The reason why the blockchain was growing, developing, all those projects, what we can see now, unicorn companies and so on, those are in the market. And the reason is why it was done in unregulated environment at the beginning. So I really agree with you that we need to somehow to build less regulated but still safe environment for startups to develop the new ideas, new projects, and this is how the ecosystem can grow. And in my opinion, when we have this kind of environment over-regulated, as you said, it actually stops the whole development of ecosystem. Nobody wants to be in the region where you actually are limited a lot and you can't even do anything, in most of the cases, because we have this framework, we have strict rules, and you cannot actually invent something new because, it's out of the scope, out of regulations. What I really wanted to say that the reason for the growth is the place where we don't have rules, right?
Yeah.
In my opinion.
You see, Darius, I think what you just described is a appropriate approach that we should deploy in Europe, because I think we should not copy what others do. I think the major point should be that we find our European specific approach, which should be a blend of being, like you said, on a regulated, trustful basis, but giving enough freedom that the new opportunities can grow.
Yep.
Yeah. And then this is where then we see that everything is interconnected. Yeah. Because, for example, if you take a look on the Draghi report, I think 400 pages report every year about competitiveness of Europe, where it says exactly that we are quite strong in new ideas, in brilliant founders, but we are so weak on then funding them when they go into their scaling phase. And that's when we lose them, which is, in my point of view, a double shot in our head, because first we have this potential. We have these bright minds and innovative people that create something new. And then when they start growing, we give them away. I mean, think about this.
Yeah.
We have the potential, and only then when it becomes successful, we give it away. I mean, guys, please wake up. So, and that's why when you see that, for example, the liquidity crunch, that we have as a first track, is connected with the competitiveness and the free zones that we need, because the fragmentation of the capital, is on the one side hindering that they get the money they need for growth, and on the other side we have not enough of the free zones where they can really then actually unfold their potential. So we have many layers in Europe that are in itself hindering our prosperity, and we need to change this. And that's where, again, I think we need to find our European specific approach that should be, and that could be really a vision for the future, creating our own success story and a success approach towards this ecosystem.
We work on daily basis with Web3 companies and startups, and you and myself, we have experience at this, and we understand the technology a bit, but I'm not sure if politicians, we understand. And this is, I think, the major problem, because we cannot introduce new policies, or we cannot, fix some kind of regulatory issues just because we don't understand. But I think it's down to education. We need to be educated, firstly, to be able to release new laws, new rules, and so on. That would be the help if we could be educated more. This is how we could actually launch really good programs, to support startups, fund them, to organize EU funding, actually, to start the new programs related to that.
Yeah, no, this is a very important point and good question, by the way. Yeah, thank you for that. What I experience on a regular basis is that there are, I would say, a few politicians that are aware of the topic. Yeah, I think politicians, they don't need to fully understand the technology. I myself, I'm not a IT person, but what they need to understand, and this is where our conference comes in, they need to understand the economic relevancy. And this is what I regularly see that has not yet taken place. Yeah? There are some, I would say, partial initiatives. Like, for example, I was invited last year to the House of Lords for a roundtable by Baroness Manzila Udin, and she will also be on our conference, by the way, next month. She's a strong supporter of blockchain technology and of educating politicians about blockchain technology and what it can do and where the potentials lie. Yeah, and I see this everywhere, but it's too much, also fragmented. We need a more concerted approach towards educating politicians. And this is actually where our conference comes in, because on the second day of the conference, we will present the results of these 4 tracks that I just talking about. And we will then, after the conference, take the results of these 4 tracks and translate them in our Vienna Declaration. And the Vienna Declaration will be the position paper from the industry towards the policymakers and decision makers and regulatory bodies, and also our tool in order to bring it to the media and start educating politicians. Yeah? Because one thing is for sure, politicians always react to what media says. Yeah? So our idea is to bring our ideas, our requests, our proposals through our Vienna Declaration to the media, to the decision makers and policymakers, and then start a dialogue and start changing the whole ecosystem for the better. Yeah? So that's the idea here. And at the end of the day, if we manage to get the top voices of the industry on board, and it looks quite good for the first issue of our conference next month, if we manage to get also the important associations like Blockchain for Europe, GBBC and so on, they are all also on board with us, and to get them into the dialogue with the decision makers and policymakers. And I think then we're really set to change the whole ecosystem for the better. And that's actually the idea behind it.
I love this idea, to be honest with you. I really support you on that. And I just got the idea, maybe the same idea and method and strategy can work in other jurisdictions too. There are so many things fragmented in the market itself in Europe, and everybody trying to fight their own fight. But instead of fighting alone, we could actually work together. So, for example, I also would love to support you on those, measures. Let's say I could even replicate some of the things, in Lithuania, for example, and we can start working with Lithuanian government, Lithuanian conferences, and people who are in that ecosystem. And we can involve, Baltic region. We can involve other countries, in Europe, and we can work on the same ideas. And we can push the same ideas to the politics. So if you will need any support in the future in Europe, in other jurisdictions, let me know. I'm more than happy to help you.
Yeah, very happy to do so. Yeah, I mean, since last year especially, has clearly shown that there is no alternative than to stand together as Europe. If you look on the figures, Europe is still strong. We're still economically strong. We are a market of more than 400 million people. We sometimes forget this. Yeah? And I think we need to face that if we stand together, we can really be strong, we can be prosperous. And I mean, at the end of the day, I feel more European than anything else. Yeah, I mean, that's especially how I feel. And I think if you start feeling like that, yeah, I mean, be proud on your country, be proud on your town, whatever. Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's how it should be. But if we start thinking first, Europe first, yeah, then I think it can be a good approach. And if we mix this with our values that we have in Europe, which are, you know, being reliable and being trustful, and but also being more on the liberal side, yeah, I think that we can really develop our own approach and our own prosperity, and maybe that could be a blueprint also for other countries. Yeah.
I'm going to analyze, what is the population, for example, in Russia itself, in US. If I remember correctly, in Russia we have 140 million, people, and as you said, in Europe we have 400 people. So it's like huge difference in numbers. And I agree with you that we have big market and we need to use it.
Yeah. Russia is around 144, 45
44,
million.
yeah.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
and compared with Europe, we have more people, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And the US is, I think, around 200 or 300. No, it's 345, yeah. But we have more inhabitants in Europe still. Yeah, so I think the focus is clear. Yeah, let's stand more together in Europe, and if we do that, then we can really move big ideas. We're able to achieve more that we sometimes think that we could do.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Okay, so we touched politics and Europe as a region itself. I would like to come back maybe again to ValueX because people who will be watching this, most of them will be like startup founders, people who wants to start building projects and so on. You was mentioning one interesting thing that you are doing scoring for the startups.
Yes.
What it takes for the startup to come to you and what it takes to actually start the scoring and what's happening next. For example, if I will not pass the scoring and I will get the low score, what will happen? Maybe you can help actually to improve,
Yes.
to upgrade, to make it better. How does it work?
Yeah. So that's quite simple. If you go to our website, ValueX.at, and you go to selection, which is the platform where we showcase our projects. We're currently showcasing and supporting around 40 projects. There is a button which says apply for listing. And then you have a questionnaire, answer a few questions, give some data and some numbers. And then you get the results of your own assessment. But on top of that, we do then our official rating. And this rating is then taken to get into a follow-up meeting. By the way, at the end of the questionnaire, you can also select a time slot for a follow-up meeting. Then we can discuss about our insights, about our results. If the score is too low, then we are also happy to share where we see the weak points and where the project has to work on and has to improve. It's actually 200 points, which is the minimum that projects have to achieve. If it's a minimum of 200 points, then we are happy to discuss how we can support. So it's a very simple process. And then we take it from there. And it really varies from projects just need funding or just want visibility to they need really support in building the team or the venture or launching on the market and developing a go-to-market strategy. So it really depends, but we're open to discussions about everything that makes sense, because at the end of the day, our vision from the very beginning was identifying good projects and supporting them.
Okay. And as I understand also, just for my clarification, if the scoring is good, we also have opportunity to get your help with fundraising, let's say, with capital gains, right? Can you explain a bit about your network? Because you was mentioning previously that you have network of investors, maybe angel investors, venture capitals.
When we started with ValueX, the approach was on a more quantitative basis, I would say. So we built a database of around 3,000 investors, mainly VCs, family offices. We found out that a quantitative approach doesn't work. Yep. It's really about personal connections. So what we deployed today is basically a network of personal contacts to VCs, family offices, and business angels and angel investors. We are talking about around 200 individuals. It's a little bit more because it's steadily growing. We also operate an investors club, but it's this 200 plus contacts, and this is what we bring in. And if a project comes to us and wants to get funded, then we just select those that are the most relevant ones. Sometimes we also organize some online pitch sessions. Yeah, but that's it. Yeah, it's really about relationship, especially when it comes to investments. I think we all know that since the last years, venture capital is really quite scarce. Liquidity is really tight. I mean, all the basic fundamental data in the market shows that. So, for example, if you look at the second fundraising for venture capital funds, you find out that there have been hardly any second funds managing to successfully raise. Which in turn means that the smaller and mid-sized venture capital funds are slowly and silently dying away or going out of business. And the large ones, I mean, they work, like A16Z and so on. That's something that still works. So we really have a concentration in that market, which is also quite challenging, because then it's in the hand of a few ones to decide who gets support and who not. And that in terms makes it even more important to have a good personal network that you can deploy and where you can get relevant investors in.
Yeah, I also noticed that as I was speaking with some venture capitals, specifically from Web3, we told me one interesting thing. We said we had a first initial venture capital maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and we said that we did really good job investing into the, let's say, major tokens.
Yep.
And if you remember that moment when all the Solana, Bitcoin, and Ethereum was skyrocketing at that moment. So it was easy for them to make really huge gains. After the cycle was completed of venture capital, we closed completely the venture capital. We actually fixed the profits and so on. We tried to open a new venture capital and we tried to represent a new idea and new strategy. And we've been using this experience, historic data, saying that we were so successful. Look at us, we are brilliant founders of venture capital and we can actually make business here. But liquidity providers didn't thought that this is valid anymore because those times were completely different compared with now. Oliver, also for the people who will be watching this, can you tell what is your main focus right now? Is it like Web3 only, or is it also might be AI projects? Can you just elaborate on this?
Our focus has from the very beginning always been, I would say, something like Warren Buffett approach, which has been value investing. It was actually about understanding the business model and asking the question, will this business model prevail for the next 10 years also? And will it also work in 10 years time? And then taking a look on the valuation. And if it's a fair valuation, then it's maybe a good thing to invest in. And this has been always our approach. In terms of verticals, I would say that everything that is related with health is something that really makes sense. That's also the reason why I'm currently supporting CATS, which is in the care industry market. And then in terms of crypto, of course, everything that is in the financial solutions area can only be interesting because that's where actually the growth is currently happening. The growth is institutional, adoption is institutional, and this is where the large sums and the tremendous growth will come from in the next years. And then I also have personally and also with ValueX one perspective that we think is still in its beginning and maybe also has been a little bit overlooked, but has a bright future, I believe. And this is the whole DePIN sector. Yeah. So decentralized physical infrastructure networks is something that has a bright future in my point of view, because you can do real world businesses, processes in a much more efficient way, and you can scale in a completely different dimension. Yeah, with the help of blockchain technology, but it's in its very beginning. Yeah? So we have, for example, for more than 1.5 years, heavily supporting Onokoi, which is a GNSS, so a high precision GPS data built on a blockchain enabled platform for 1.5 years. And for example, it's a super interesting project, but the market is still in its infancy, and this is what we have to accept. Sometimes you have a very interesting market, but it's not mature, and then you have to give it a little bit of time.
Yeah, and I love this approach, value investing. So I really agree with that 100%. So Oliver, thank you one more time, for being here. I really appreciate that. It means a lot to my YouTube channel and to my community. People are going to love it, and thanks a lot one more time.
Thank you, Darius, and talk soon concerning our other steps we want to take together.